I couldn't live. I was so uncomfortable inside my body from just all the things, right, that had happened to me that were
Mhm.
still all informing my life. And from an energetic perspective, from a mental perspective, from an emotional place, like everything was the filter that I viewed my life through.
Mm.
And I was always looking to the outside to give me information about how I should think and feel. When I realized how to turn that, when I started to turn towards myself as opposed to turn away from myself and abandon myself
Mm.
in situations.
Mm.
And that practice, that process of developing the relationship with who I am changed everything.
Today's guest is Sarah Noble, a mystic, a spiritual guide, and transformational coach. As a portal between the seen and unseen worlds, she lives in devotion to creating spaces that allow people to be fully alive and deeply connected to their intuition. She's passionate about inspiring you to live as your authentic self, creating a life that is not defined by your circumstances, but rather one crafted by your true desires. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Anita. It's good to be here with you.
Wow, I'm really excited for this conversation. Tell me more, tell me more. So,
Yeah.
what is one of the most courageous things that you have done? I'm sure there's many. If you can pick one.
Yeah, I would say, as you were reading that introduction and that part about really not being defined by our circumstances, I would say for me, it was really having the courage to believe that and step into
Mm.
that. And even though, the outside world says this is how you are, this is how you live, this is what's available to you, and really saying no, like I want to create something different. And I would say that started with this deepening into the spiritual path.
Mm.
And I was in an 11-year career in publishing.
Wow.
And I had my son at 40, almost 41. And then I had my daughter at 42. And I was
Mhm.
trying to show up at work in full capacity, show up for these two babies in full capacity, just being in this life that felt so confining. And so when my daughter was born, my second child, I resigned from my career
Mhm.
without knowing really what I was going to do. But I
Mm.
knew that this desire in my heart to be on this path to really deepen my connection to spirit, to help others in this capacity, to really deepen my intuition, there was something in there, and I had to risk really, right, everything in order to follow that path, because that's a lot of money to give up, especially when you have
Yeah,
two
I'm
babies.
sure. Yes.
So, but I did that, and then it was one following one step at a time, and I was deeply depressed after I
Mm.
had my kids postpartum, leaving work, my marriage wasn't going well. And I had this moment where my OBGYN said, "You have to take antidepressants."
Mhm.
And she's like, "You're falling apart. Like you can't help anybody in
Mm.
this place." And I was in her office, and I was just so confused. And I left with a prescription. And as I was getting in my car, I heard this voice inside me, and it said, "Let me show you another way."
Ooh.
And I was like, "Oh my gosh, like, okay, like, who is this? What's happening?" Like, I was already on the journey. So I was like, okay, my guide, spirit, what is happening here? But I
Mhm.
wasn't at the level of faith and trust and understanding that I am now. And so for me, it really felt like I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to
Mhm.
listen to this voice and I'm going to let it guide me. And that was, my daughter's almost 8. So it was
Mhm.
shortly like after she was born. And ever since then, it's just been one step, one step. What's the next thing that I'm tolerating that isn't working? And what
Wow.
am I going to do? Am I
Mm.
going to stay doing this, or am I going to find the courage to step into the unknown? And so I think
Yes.
that would be the pivotal point that led me to this moment. I mean, my whole life probably led me to this moment,
Yeah.
right? Like that's how it is. But like that was such a defining moment, finding that courage to just not know and be so what I felt was broken at the time, really a dark night of the soul. And
Wow.
just having the courage to say, okay, I'm going to listen to this voice inside of me and see what happens.
And that's brilliant. I, for one, I'm glad you did.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes. And
It's an adventure.
absolutely, life is an adventure. It's whether we take it on board or not. Sometimes, even when we don't want to, it chases after us.
Oh my gosh, yes. And if we don't listen, it gets louder and louder.
Yes.
And things start happening. And then they get bigger and bigger. And eventually we're like, oh my gosh, I have to listen.
So tell me more about being a mystic spiritual guide. What actually does that entail, Sarah?
So when I started out, I said I was an intuitive because what I
Uh,
was really excited about and leaning into was intuiting information. Like it was this
mm,
beautiful process that just, I felt alive when I was doing it,
mhm,
right? Because I'm
mhm,
channeling
mhm,
spiritual information through my body and I'm delivering it, and people's lives are changing in those moments. And it was such a beautiful process. But I didn't really believe in myself enough at that
mm,
point, right? It was like, here's this thing I can do, but who am I? Like, who am I being inside of my life as I'm accessing this gift? And what I have understood and deepened into as I continue down the path is where I sort of became a mystic, and why I love that word is because the sort of loose definition is you're in devotion to
mm,
living with God,
mhm,
and everything that is esoteric and everything that is spiritual. And it shifted from this is what I do to this is who I am.
mhm,
This is the truth. This is my being. This is who I show up in the world as, is this person in devotion to connection and intuition as a spiritual practice, as a way to live life, not
mm.
just, well, this is my job. And then
Yeah.
like I live this whole other life. It's like, no, this is the very essence of the way that I live, breathe, what I show up for. And the spiritual guide piece came as seeing the changes in my life from the circumstances I was born into, the
Mhm,
life that I was raised in. And then as I ventured out into the world again, right, all these circumstances,
mhm, mhm,
I want to show people how to live outside of their circumstances. And so that guide piece comes in through that. And for me, it's a spiritual practice. There are many, many ways to do
uh-huh,
this, but for me, it's spiritual. It's really being in connection with the divine
mhm,
and remembering that we're divine beings here in a body having a human experience.
mhm,
I
mhm.
tell my kids, like we were talking about, we're just learning to be human. Like we're gonna
Yes,
mess it up. We're gonna make mistakes. This is tricky for us. We're a soul trying to do this, you know?
definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so, really wanting to help others on that journey, like
Mhm,
people that are hungry for that, that they hear that call, right? The call from
mhm,
spirit to live a
mhm,
different life.
mhm.
And I want to help with that. I want to guide people. I can't do it for you, it's your own journey. And yet, I can walk ahead and hold your hand, lead by example, show you something different,
Mm.
really help you question what you believe, and then help you step into what's possible.
Oh, that's beautiful. Love that. That nicely goes into my next question, actually. People often refer to a soul calling, finding or rediscovering one's purpose. How do we really know what that is?
I would say that some people they're born knowing, right? Like some people they come
Hmm.
into this life and they just know and they
Absolutely.
follow a path. And then others of us, like myself, have to go on this wild adventure and not figure out until you're in your late 40s. Like but what I'm seeing more and more is that every piece of the journey led to this moment. All those
Mm.
things that I didn't understand why I was doing
Hmm.
them, or I was doing them for the wrong reasons, really weren't. They were all part of the process of knowing who we are. And I believe like that purpose piece it gets covered up by all our conditioning, the way we're raised, the way we're educated, the situations that happen to us, right? They condition us to say we have to live this particular way because we're trying to avoid all the things we don't want to look at. We're afraid.
Mm.
And as we find the courage to peel back the conditioning, to really come into who am I in my heart? Who did I come here to be? I believe the journey shows us the little pearl of what it is that we want to do. Because I didn't know that this was what I wanted to do. And I
Hmm.
meandered and did a lot of other cool things.
Yeah, sure.
But I always was missing something. I certainly
Uh-huh.
was always searching for what's the thing. I remember listening to something, gosh, like 15 years ago about what's your dharma. And I was like, oh, what's my dharma? I'm not even sure I know what the word means, but I know I got to investigate this more? And always having that like pull, like, and I touch my heart a lot because as I'm speaking, I realize it's almost like this thread that pulls from my heart
Mm.
and it just keeps guiding me forward little by little along the path. And, it's making me think of when you said in the beginning, like life is an adventure. Often I believe we're like, we need to know the thing now because it needs to happen now. And
Yes.
it's like, well, that misses out on the adventure piece. It's not about the destination, it's the journey. And I know it's cliche, and yet it's so
Mm.
true. I re-
Absolutely true.
Mhm. Yeah, like I remind myself of that when I'm, doing the dishes and I'm getting frustrated because I need to know. And I'm like, Sarah Bear, it's the journey, my love. It's the dishes right now. It's not about the thing, like you'll get there.
So that's the thing, isn't it? We're always in a rush. We always want the next thing, this. Actually, if we slow down, life would be so much better.
Yeah.
Take it all in.
Yeah. I actually did a podcast episode and it was called
Hmm.
something like Slowing Down is Your Superpower
Hmm.
because it really is. It's like, we're either in the past or in the
Hmm.
future.
Hmm.
And, in the Andean traditions I'm studied in, and also it's becoming more and more people are talking about it, how time doesn't really exist. This moment is all we have. And
Absolutely.
when we get into the quantum models, right, of what actually is reality in our world, we step outside of time. There is
Hmm.
no past, there is no future, and we
Hmm.
actually have, if we do quantify them, we have the ability to change them with what we're thinking and feeling. There's I heard and love this idea that depression is wallowing about the past and anxiety is worrying about the future.
Hmm.
And when we're in either of those places, there's a tendency to be in either one of those emotions or
Hmm.
states of being, right? And obviously that's not a clinical definition and that
Hmm.
isn't the totality of it. It's just a way to look at it to possibly see something different.
Yes, definitely. Absolutely. So, how is doing what you love the key to living your best life?
Oh, I love this. um it takes me back to right the purpose and this
Hmm.
thread of the heart and what we're tolerating. Like
Hmm.
when our heart really knows why we're here, why we
Yes.
chose to be in this body, why we chose the parents we have, why we chose all the
Hmm.
situations and circumstances. Our heart knows that. And then
Yes.
we have this beautiful mind that is more connected to our conditioning, that just wants to keep us safe and make sure we're okay and that we don't do anything big and scary
Yeah,
because we could die. Like that's what it believes because it's connected to our survival mechanism.
absolutely.
And so for me, building the frequency of doing what you love, even if that's not for work, right? If that's maybe you're in your career, it's not actually the thing you love yet, but you make sure
Mm,
that you devote time to being out in nature, going on
mhm.
those walks that you love, making sure you
Yeah.
swim or you get in the water or surf or snowboard or whatever the thing is. If you're feeding your soul in some way, it
Mm,
gives you access to frequencies that aren't available when we're just in our mind, when we're
wow.
just in the doing and the have do's and the shoulds. There's not a lot of space in there for spirit to come in
Mm,
and like give you this little miracle of like, oh,
definitely.
go that way because that's really what you want to be doing.
Mm,
And then, taking it to the next level is saying, I do not like this job. Like, this is my experience. I do not like this job anymore. I have loved it. It has served me. And yes, I don't know what the future holds. And yet
mhm,
I'm willing to risk the thing I don't love in order to do the thing I do love. Because
mm,
to me, there's something changes in us, in
mhm,
our energetic field when we stop doing the things that are against what we know we want. There's
mhm.
it's an energetic, um,
Absolutely. Mm,
it sends something out into the void, into the field that allows more opportunity to come to us. We can't see opportunity if we just have our head down trying to make it through the day, to pay the bills, to get the kids from school, to read the book for book club, whatever the things are that we tell ourselves we have to do, we just
mhm,
close off to opportunity.
mm,
And in that space too, right? We're always creating. We're
yeah.
creators. We're divine creators.
Just allowing that flow.
Yeah. And when you do what you love, you
Mm,
open that channel that then goes out and creates a very different future than the
mhm,
one that gets created from the shoulds.
definitely. Yes. I know, Sarah, you talk about relationships with oneself is the pathway to our intuition. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so my experience through my life,
Mhm,
I really didn't, I wasn't taught how to have a relationship with myself.
mhm,
I was very externally validated, very concerned about what everybody else was doing, thinking, saying, especially about
mhm.
me.
Most
And
people, most people.
yeah, right? Like we allow the truth of who
Mm,
we are to be a reflection of what others think of us.
mm,
And it was changing that. It was really learning that I'm not my thoughts,
mhm.
that I'm the one that gets to think the thoughts. The thoughts don't think me.
Yes.
And then actively working with a process in that space. And then I couldn't live. I was so uncomfortable inside my body
Mhm,
from just all the things, right, that had happened to me that were
mhm.
still all informing my life.
Okay.
And from an energetic perspective, from a mental perspective, from an emotional place, like everything was the filter that I viewed my life through.
Mhm,
And I was always looking to the outside to give me information about how I should think and feel or
mhm.
do. And when I realized how to turn that, when I started to turn towards myself as opposed to turn away from myself and abandon myself
Mm,
in situations.
mm,
And that practice, that process of developing the relationship with who I am changed everything.
yeah.
Because then I became internally referenced. Doesn't, again,
Mm,
right? Circumstances don't define me. What I believe about me is what defines me.
mhm, mhm.
And so building the frequency of that relationship. I mean, if we think about it, there's a quote that I love and it's like if we talk to our friends the way we talk to ourselves,
Yes.
would you have any friends? And back then, the answer was an easy no for me because I was so hard on myself and
Mhm.
just uncomfortable and always running from things
Mhm.
instead of just turning towards, facing, looking at how can I love this part of me that's struggling right now? And so, in the
Absolutely.
developing, yeah, of that relationship, a place for my intuition appeared. And that's why, for me, intuition is a very embodied experience. We do have our spirit guides, we have our power animals, we've
Mhm.
got all this unseen
Mm.
support. And yet, for me, the true sort of portal or place of my intuition, it lives inside me. It's that voice,
Mhm.
right? At the car that day, let me show you another way. It came
Yes.
from inside me.
Mhm.
It wasn't external. And so that practice of loving ourselves and deepening into ourselves, it's like it opened a channel for me from my crown
Mhm.
chakra through to my root chakra, that as I strengthen this place inside me, it's like I love the words for it of inner authority, like the place inside me that knows what's best for me, my inner
Mhm.
authority. Inside of this place, I can connect with my intuition in a very deep and beautiful way. I know when I'm going to make a decision, what I'm going to choose,
Mhm.
because I feel it inside me that this is the path, this is the choice. And I built that. It's like a muscle. It just had
Mhm.
atrophied over time. And as I strengthened it and worked at it, it strengthened.
That's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And I think we've got to trust ourselves. We're going to have days where we don't, but it's listening to ourselves more and more. But you have to get to a certain place where you can actually trust yourself for sure. And it's
Yeah.
doing the work on ourselves as well. People don't tend to realize that they want to run 100 miles ahead, but, you know, slow down, actually take in what's happening. Yes, definitely. You host the podcast, The Modern Day Intuitive. Tell me more about your show.
Thanks. What I do is an intuitive reading for
Mm-hmm.
a guest who comes on, and we go into what are the things, like what's keeping you stuck, what is your purpose, or where can you focus. It really just depends on the information that comes through for the
Mm-hmm.
guest. And what I find is the gift of this podcast is it one shows us that we're all connected. We
Mm-hmm.
share the same problems and challenges and feelings and thoughts, because as guests listen to the show and hear this conversation, that's a vulnerable conversation,
Mm-hmm. For
they
sure.
see so much of it in themselves. And so it's a beautiful gift in that way. And then my other desire and prayer for the show is that it helps listeners see that they are intuitive,
Mm-hmm.
that the way that I I sort of teach a little bit too as I'm channeling, as a way to really allow you to see how your intuition might come through and validate that when you know something, you really know it. Like, you
Yes.
don't have to run around and ask everybody for permission, right? To know
Mm-hmm.
this, you know it. And I think the show models that for people, that they really do. They are connected to their inner wisdom. They just don't trust it. And so, hoping to really allow them that space to see that
Mm-hmm.
they can trust it.
That's fantastic.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then I do some other episodes where I just talk about a topic, a spiritual topic, or, in honor of this show I just recorded yesterday, in honor of our conversation. And
Okay.
it's, oh, what did I title it? To be afraid and do it anyway.
Love it.
Yeah. And so I just give talks on
Yeah.
different topics that help along
Mhm.
the personal growth and spiritual journey.
That's fantastic. And that ties in nicely with my next question. So, what resources do you recommend, tools, daily tips to anyone that wants to start tapping into their intuitive skills and how to develop themselves spiritually? I mean, what's the first step?
I let's see, for I would say that the first step, right, is really honoring the desire.
Mm-hmm.
Like, your soul is speaking to you. You know that you're more than just this physical being. And it's accepting that and honoring that, I think, right? Because it plays around in that place of trust. Like, how do we develop something that we don't necessarily think is real, or we don't have enough capacity
Mhm.
inside us to say, well, is this true? I don't know,
Yeah.
this could all be made up. And so I think it's really saying yes. Yes to you, that you are divine. You have these gifts, and it's okay to develop them. That makes me think of another thing that I think comes up is, and it happened for me too, is fear of,
Mm.
well, what's out there? I don't want to attract bad energy to me, or I don't
Mhm.
know what I'm going to see out there. Like, if I start, am I going to, I don't know, be haunted by ghosts, or, like just these kind
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
things that
People
float
are,
around.
yeah, they're not sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's knowing that this is a divine process, that you are safe, you are protected in the beginning. And what I found is that as I went further along the journey, I learned about protection. I
Mm.
learned about ways that I get to manage my energy, right? Because we're
Mhm.
energetic beings. And so as we're starting to open even more, it's important to have some energetic hygiene in order to not keep everybody's energy, like just really to run your own energy through your system. So these are all kind of things that sort of came to me through the process as I started to investigate and dive deeper. Practice. Part of when I heard that voice of let me show you another way, one of the big things that I was asked to do was really commit to a meditation
Mm.
practice
Mhm.
daily. And that meant 4 a.m. my alarm was going off, because I
Ooh.
had to fit it in before my
Mm.
kids got up.
Mhm.
And their babies, young toddlers, they get up early. And I had to say yes to that, and I had to commit to that. And in that space of just sitting, for me, it's less about not thinking, right? The mind is made to think. It's always going to
Mhm.
think.
Mm.
What it's a practice of is learning to create a space within the thoughts. It's learning to just see the thoughts for what they are, like when they get you. And I'm like thinking about something, that a conversation that happened, and without having sort of a relationship with your mind, you can be
Mhm.
thinking about that for 55 minutes, right? Recreating it in your head. You've got all these
Absolutely.
emotions going in your body. Why
The
didn't I
stories
say
we
this?
make up.
Right? Well, the what happens is you start to catch it
Mm.
sooner and sooner. And now I'll be
Mhm.
like 2 minutes in and I'm like, oh, you got me. I don't need to think about that. That's like not important right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it builds the bandwidth and the capacity to catch your mind when it wants to
Mm.
just go running wild on you. So having that stillness practice where
Mhm.
you are cultivating the relationship with you, looking at the things that come up and questioning, is this really true? Like, is
Mm.
this story that I'm telling myself that I've lived inside of for the last 20 years really me? No, it's not. But you need a place to come to actually
Mhm.
spend some time looking at that. Because our intuition, as it like the channeling comes through me, it
Mhm.
comes like in my crown, but it has to bypass my mind, has to bypass the thinking, and just go through into the back channels and through the pineal and pituitary and then into my body in order for me to receive it. And what happens is, if it's just coming in and then getting stuck in the mind, you're not going to be able to connect to it, because the mind just sucks
For
up all
sure.
the energy and uses it to like beat
Mhm.
yourself up about why you didn't say the thing at the last meeting you were at.
Mhm.
Those are things that I've found really helpful. And for me, if I'm having a particularly hard time getting out of my head, because some days I think the collective energy is stronger,
Mhm.
something will have happened in the world, and there's more fear, there's more angst, there's
Mhm.
more collective thought roaming around, and it'll plug in hard, like you feel it, and it's hard to get away from. And we personalize it. I have like a full-on playlist of videos that I want to watch that are inspirational, or I have
Mhm.
a playlist of music. I have podcasts lined up to
Mhm.
go. And when I
Mhm.
recognize that I'm having trouble getting like out of the thought patterns,
Mhm.
I just put something on and get inspiration from a conversation or other people's music or words or things that can really get me out of it.
And that's fantastic. That's what we all need to do. Sometimes you just got to say, okay, that's a thought. It's an observation that it's there, but let it go. You don't
Yes.
have to interact with it. Okay,
Hmm.
that's good. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And some days I find that I'm really on it and it's easy to do.
Mm,
And other days
mm,
it's more
mm,
challenging. And I think
mhm.
that's just part of the human experience. We can't be expected to get it right all the time.
For
Like
sure.
we're just gonna get sucked into it sometimes. And the important part is to not stay sucked into it, like to really
Mm,
have practices that help get you out when you just got caught.
definitely. Yeah, that's fantastic. So, Sarah, where can the listeners find you online, your podcast, and what's your website?
I'm sarahnoble.com. And then on social media, I'm at the Modern Day Intuitive. And the podcast is called the Modern Day Intuitive Podcast.
It's fantastic.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing your courageous journey with us today. And by doing so, you have helped so many others, Sarah Noble.
Mhm. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to talk about the things that I love.
My pleasure. What is, because we are all about create the courage to be fearless here, what is your definition of courage?
So I would say it's initiation by fire. And
Wow.
and by that I mean not like having the courage to walk through the fire and let everything burn that isn't working, right? Everything that you're tolerating, everything that you're doing that isn't in support of who you came here to be. It's walking through the fire so that it can burn away, so that you can rise from the ashes
Mm,
really into the truth of who you are. And it changes us. Having that courage changes our future. It changes everything about us. And it helps us be fully alive, which is what we really came here to be.